In this video, we're going to look at solving literal equations for a specific variable, which just means isolating one variable, getting one thing alone. You learned how to do this in Algebra 1. We didn't spend a lot of time on this here in Algebra 2, but we did learn a couple of techniques that are useful for more complex equations. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. The formula for calculating the kinetic energy of an object is this disgusting equation here. Solve the formula for the speed of the object v. So what we want to do is we want to get v alone. That's our goal. V is inside the equation right here. One of the techniques that I taught you guys for getting a variable alone is, it's kind of like what we did when we found inverses. You can make a list of everything happening to your variable and then undo those things in the opposite order. So v is being squared, then it's being multiplied by m, and it's being multiplied by 1/2, which basically means it's being divided by 2. Now we want to undo these things in the opposite order to get it alone, so we're going to undo 3, then 2, then 1, using opposite operations. So in step 3, it's being multiplied by 1/2, which means it's being divided by 2. I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 2 to undo that. It's being multiplied by m. I'm going to divide by m to undo that. And it's being squared. So the last thing I'm going to do is to square root. So these 3 operations here are going to help me get v completely alone. So I'm going to start by multiplying both sides by 2, this side and this side. I end up with 2 times e sub k, and it's going to be equal to the times 2 and the 1/2 cancel each other, mv squared. Done. Up next, we'll divide both sides by m, divided by m, divided by m. These m's are now gone. Done. And we end up with 2 e sub k over m equals v squared. And last but not least, I'm going to have to do square root to both sides. So square root here and here. That will cancel out my squared. Now because we put the square root in and it wasn't part of the original problem, I do also need to add a plus or minus in front. So I'm going to end up with v is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2 e sub k over m. Now one very small nitpicky thing, it does say the speed of an object, and speed can't be negative. It can only be positive. Velocity, which is what v stands for, velocity could be negative. That just means I'm moving in the opposite direction. But since it asks for speed, we would actually just take the positive answer, 2 e sub k over m inside a square root. There we go. And that's completely isolated. Let's go ahead and try number 9 now. Now for number 9, I have x in more than one place here. So I can't just make a list of everything happening to x because x is in more than one spot with more than one thing happening to it. So in order to figure out what x is, I'm first going to have to get x in just one place. And since x is in more than one spot, I'm going to have to start by factoring. The GCF in both of these terms is x. So I'm going to start by factoring x to the front of the equation. So I'm going to take 3x and remove the x. 3 will be left. And I'm going to take negative 5xy and remove the x. I'm going to have negative 5y. Now x is in just one place right out front. So now if I was going to take a look at what's happening to x, x is being multiplied by 3 minus 5y, so I can undo that by dividing by 3 minus 5y. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3 minus 5y, and I actually will get x completely alone. That was it. So factoring was what had to happen there because x was in more than one spot. So x is equal to 7 divided by 3 minus 5y, and that guy's all done. We've got one more to take a look at here. This time we're solving for y, and y is stuck inside this radical right here, and I don't want it there, so I'm going to have to undo that radical. Now, the radical is all by itself on the left-hand side, so I can go ahead and undo that second root by using the opposite, which is the second power. But I'm going to have to do that to both sides. So I'm going to end up with 3y minus 4, which is going to be equal to whatever 6x plus 8 is to the second power. Now, I could actually FOIL that out. I don't have to. It doesn't say that I have to do anything with my x's. It just says that I need to get y alone. So let's continue getting y alone. So if we were going to make a list, the first thing happening was that it was being square rooted. oh, I'm sorry, start from the inside. The first thing that would have been happening to y is that it was being multiplied by 3. Then we are subtracting 4. And the last thing that happened, that tied it all in together, was that square root symbol. So what we did is we undid the square root first. We squared both sides. Now we're going to have to undo minus 4 by adding 4. Then we're going to have to divide by 3. So we're just going to continue undoing everything happening to y. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I end up with 3y is 6x plus 8 squared plus 4, and last but not least, divide by 3. So I end up with y is equal to 6x plus 8 squared plus 4 over 3. And we are all set. Y is completely alone. That is it for solving literal equations. We're going to pick up with rational and radical equations in the next video.